Good evening and welcome to round 3 of the Sam Pearce Motorsport CV-19 Project Cars 2 Clio Cup, coming from a very sunny Oulton Park. As we head into the third round, we've had some great races so far. 2 rounds down, 4 races gone, and leading the championship is the defending champion from Series 1, Matt Parr in Grant Motorsport with 80 points. In 2 is Graham with 64. 3 is Pro-Am Racing Scott with 48. 4th is Ed to the Bratmobile with 47. Rob Lewis Racing, who has been on the pace but had a tricky second race at Silverstone, in P5 with 44. Alex Neville, who's been running right at the very front in most of the races, again having a bad second race at Silverstone in race 2 on 38. Kiwi Russ, having missed out on the first race in the first round at Donington Park because he backed out of the lobby accidentally, still hanging on in there with 37 points despite that one no score. Sam Pearce consistently doing better than he did last series, always in and around the leaders. Will he be able to make that a little bit better in P8 with 27? Dave of the North in P9 with 10, and rounding out our top 10 is Big Tom Starkey, the ginger wrecking ball himself, in P10 with 6 points. We do know that this is going to be an interesting race, a narrow circuit, very different to the one that we had at Silverstone last week. Big, fast, wide and open, lots of opportunities for overtaking. Is it going to be simply a case of who's going to make the least mistakes is the one that's going to win this race? And our top 14 drivers in the championship are lining up on this grid with Ed to the Bratmobile, TOT, in pole position with a great lap time, but has he managed to convert that into a win? Not so far. Is this the time? Scott in P2, Graham in P3, Alex in P4, Rob in P5, Kiwi Russ in P6, Sam Pearce in P7, Dave of the North P8 with a great qualifying, Big Tom Starkey P9, Paul Harvey P10, Johnny T in 11th, Sam, who's a guest in this round, who won't be scoring championship points but will be racing this afternoon in a different vehicle to what you're used to seeing. Rob the Bear in P13, who's had lots of trouble keeping it on the straight and narrow in this one, and hopefully will have a better race. And Night Sky Watcher Nick McLeod in P14. Here we go. And they're off, and Ed gets a good start. It does look like that Scott's bogged down a little bit in P2. Alex Neville's got a good run up into the inside of Graham. Will he manage to convert that as they barrel into first? And Ed's clear out front. And nice and clear as we go down through the field. Has everyone managed to get through the first turn? Into T1, hugging that inside line. Paul's on the outside. Tom Starkey in front as he turns in. And there is contact between the two. And there's more contact again. The pair of them go off. Rob and Johnny T at turn 1, contact, which has sent both of them into the barriers, and that's going to put them at the back of the field and a long recovery drive over the next 20 minutes. The field has cleanly got through the first couple of corners, head out of the front, and up the inside goes Graham, who goes up wide and onto two wheels and manages to hang on. Rob's got the inside line, that's pushed Alex wide and he's gone off. Alex has gone wide and everyone's diving up the inside. Is he going to have a crash there? No, he manages it. He manages to just recover it. It's Big Tom Starkey comes through. That's not a great start there for Alex before. And he's battling down there with Russell, the torpedo, immediately behind him. And Rob's coming up the inside of Scott as well as we come down to the second chicane. Is he going to make a move stick? He's on the brakes. Nicely done. Scott being very respectful there, giving him room to move up the inside. Alex just dropped down into this P7 position. He goes wide in the first part and he hits the curve and spins again. So not a great first lap there from Alex, unfortunately. And the rest of the field is all fine. And Tom just gives him a little nudge. But that has given Russ a little bit of a run behind. Is there a bit of contact between Russ and Scott there? Possibly so, but it does mean that Scott's pulled back into that P4 position with Russ pushing on nicely behind him. And very closely behind him is Sam Pearce with a little bit of a gap back to Paul Harvey. So Paul Harvey's managed to make up a few places on the first lap here into a very solid P7. So as they come up to the tight right-hander at the end of the lap for the first time, a heavy braking zone, Sam is much tidier there than Russell, and there's a bit of contact between the pair of them as they come side by side up the start-finish straight at the end of lap 1. This is close racing as we expected, and a nice move there. It does look like Sam's got just his nose in front, and is he going to send it up the inside? Yes, he does. A little bit of the love tap there from Russ. As we come down the hill on board with Graham the Beast Crowhurst for his second lap. Head brakes on the inside there. Oh, he's up on two wheels, he's braking into the corner, and that means that Graham's crashed into him. Not really much Graham can do about that with all that momentum. It's pushed him wide, and that's enabled Rob to jump up into P1. And Scott goes past as well. So very slippery on the grass, as we know, not the ideal place to be, and that's allowed Sam to come up and give a little bit of pressure on the back of Graham. So we are used to seeing Graham give pressure to other drivers, but in this occasion he seems to be under pressure himself. And as we said before at the start of this race, is this going to be a race where the person that makes the least mistakes and is nice and consistent manages to get the better result? As we have a little look through the field, so Rob has now got out in front through some great driving at the start, gapping the rest of the field, and he's going to be difficult to pull back from there. In P2 is Scott, being pressured now by Graham, who in turn is also under some pressure from Sam, although it just looks like he's dropped off a little bit. So let's watch these two as they come up. It looks like the Beast is thinking of moving to the inside. He will have the inside line coming into this right-hander, but is Scott just far enough in front that he can't actually break into it? So they come side by side into Drury's, a tight double right-hander, not the ideal line there from Graham. He's up on the curb, and that's pushed him wide. It has, and that's allowed Sam and Russ to nip up the inside, and Graham rejoins. That could have been far worse, but he has done a good job there, and that's given Sam a run as well from P3 to have a little look at P2. So while all this is going on behind, and Russ goes wide there into the last corner. So while all this is going on behind, Rob Lewis is managing to make a little bit of a dash for it out the front, and is making the most of having some clear space ahead of him while the people are battling behind. So a little bit wide there from Scott, as Sam in P3 is pressuring for this P2. So Sam's not actually had a podium finish, some consistent P4s. He's obviously got the pace, but he hasn't actually managed to convert that into a podium. Nice and tight there with a good run, and he's got a good run at Scott, and this will be interesting as he moves up to the inside. This is a very, very fast left-hander, not normally a place where you would expect to brake and make a move as they go through together. Potentially a braking opportunity for Sam to get up the inside as he takes a couple of yards out. And Nick's gone a little bit wide there, which enabled Tom Starkey to get a run. David has got a run on the outside, hits it into Tom, and all three of them have gone off as they move down now into the first of the tricky chicanes. And here's all about not losing speed. And they are now discussed up. Very different approach line. Sam a little bit tighter on the way in. Looks like he's lost a couple of car lengths, but as he comes out, he's on the power, and he's now continuing to keep that pressure on Scott. So Scott is a proven racer in real life, and it's what Sam going to do. Is he going to just wait and be patient, or is he going to try and send it or stick a move up to him? Is he just going to hang back there, keep Scott under pressure, and just see whether or not Scott makes a mistake? It's a 20-minute race. There's a lot of racing to go, and the pair of them are not letting Robert get away at the front. So maybe Rob Lewis has made a mistake at some point, but they're definitely catching back up to him. Very fast right-hander, very easy to just get that entry wrong and go a little bit wide, as there it is, and Scott's gone a little bit wide there. Has that given Sam an opportunity to have a run at him in this P3 position? In the background, you've got Kiwi, Russ in P4 and Paul Harvey P5, and guest driver Sam in P6. We'll come back to those guys shortly, but just getting a little bit of space there, Scott, on this occasion, and Sam's just dropped off a little bit. So still no major mistakes that we've seen. Still keeping Rob Lewis honest out the front, and Sam probably just clipped the curb there a little bit, which does tend to send you right, and keeping the pressure up on Scott and not letting Rob get away, which I think is very important. They're all, these top three are 1.2 seconds apart, with another second back to Russ, and then Paul Harvey keeping it nice and tidy. And in the background as well, looks like Graham was having a little go at Sam, I guess Sam, and more of the same. So clean racing from these two. Sam Pearce not sticking a dodgy move on as he closes up once again onto the back of Scott, having a better entry and drive out of that cambered hairpin into the first chicane. Nicely done by both drivers, and Rob is not getting away at the front. And the top six are only covered, in fact the top seven are only covered by 6 seconds, and then there is a little bit of gap back to Ed. So Ed's obviously had a problem. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Coming up the hill once more, the long drag. It does seem like a long way up this hill in these Clios. Into the fast double right-hander of Druids. And these three just making a little bit of a break and just putting a little bit of distance on Kiwi Russ. As we have a scroll through, so Russ is in P4 with Paul Harvey right up behind him, not letting him get away. Paul's normally finishing down around the 9th and 10th position, so this is a nice drive from him at this point. Graham in P6, and guest Sam. Let's have our first look at our guest driver, just hanging on there. Sam, who will not score championship points, but is in the race for the first time, and he's running in the top 10, which is always really good. And Ed's had a few issues. He's out on his own back there, so something must have happened to him, and we'll probably come back to that later on. And Alex Neville also faring not so brilliantly down the back of the field as well. So some work to do for these normal front runners to get back through. And then into the rest of the field, Johnny T, big strong Starkey, Dave of the North down in P12, which is a surprise having seen the start of the race in his qualifying position. And Rob the Bear in P13. And Nick McLeod has retired into the pits, so obviously a problem there for Nick down the back of the field. As we head back to the front of the field now and have a look with their top three, and they are bunching up once again, so interesting to see as we go on board now with Sam Pearce moving to the outside, moving around, Scott defending the inside, heavy braking zone. All three cars now nose to tail, so this is interesting and exciting racing. I think there's a degree of people being a little bit patient and not deciding to take any risks early on. And it is a long race, 20 minutes, although it's nearly 2 minutes a lap. So there's not lots of laps, but there's lots of opportunities. And it's one of those things where you don't want to throw away time. So Sam, much nicer and neater and tidier there through the double apex right-handers, allowed him to get right onto the back of Scott. Scott has just lost a little bit of space, so yes, nice braking zone. Scott looking a little bit more ragged on the way through that corner. Sam being very patient and very clean, which is nice to see, rather than just make a random move and decide that he thinks he can take sort of 10 spaces. As they come into the right hand, he's having a little look up the inside. No, decides better of it, just clips the curb. And for some reason it looks like Scott's actually got the outside of the curb there, and that sent him into the right hand side. So we've lost our P2 position driver from a mistake, and we did say mistakes are going to come into it, and that's moved Sam very nicely up into P2. The gap back now as we have a little look at Kiwi Russ with Paul Harvey right up behind him again now. Both of them tracking down Graham the Beast. So Graham's been released from these guys, and we know that he's got pace when he's out on his own. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. There's Paul very late braking there. So it's quite a lot of car lengths out of Russ. Is he going to make a move? We'll wait and see. Slight mistake there from Paul. We're hitting the inside curb. He has just lost a little bit of space there because of that incident. Going into the fast chicane, late on the brakes, trying to get the drive out. With the field just spreading out a little bit. There is some competition a bit further back from Ed, who is being chased by Scott. So Scott has dropped down, unfortunately, from P2 down to P8. And Ed is gradually working his way back up the field. He is 3 seconds behind Sam, who in turn is a few seconds behind Paul. And Kiwi Russ is also closing up on the back of Graham. He's not letting Graham get away. Graham is 3 seconds off the leader and making up quite a bit of ground. So there's a lot of driving and a lot of racing still to come from these guys, although they seem to have temporarily spread out a little bit. It doesn't mean that they can't get back up together in very short order. There is some racing a bit further down the field with Tom Starkey chasing down Johnny T. So just around about a second between these two. A bit further down the field is one of our regular front runners, Alex Neville, who is currently running around in P9, a couple of seconds off the back of Scott, who in turn is a couple of seconds off the back of Ed. So the field spread out to some degree, but Graham seems to be closing up on the back of Russ, gradually reeling him in. We know that the relentless pressure of the beast is something that you don't want to be party to. In the background, Paul's just dropping off of this group. He hasn't got the outright pace of these guys, and he's running higher than he normally would do, so that's good to see. As we see Graham now tracking down Russ, taking a bit of time out of him in the braking zone, so Russ being a little bit more cautious on the way in, which has given Graham a bit of a run, and the pair of them are running nose to tail. So we don't know whether or not there's a tow benefit around this circuit which will enable Graham to close up on the back of Russ in his slipstream, but the two are fairly evenly placed over one lap. But we do know that Graham probably just has that little 1 or 2 tenths extra, and he does like to put a lot of pressure on Russ, and it does look like he's going to have a look up the inside, and Russ covers off the inside line fairly aggressively, but a fair move. It's only one move. That's put Graham onto the outside, and Russ turns in nicely, but he's run wide, and that's enabled Graham to jump past. So Graham played the wait and patient game, dummied to go up the inside. He forced Russ onto the inside line, and that didn't give him the optimal turn in, which changed the nature of the angle that he was turning into that corner, which meant that he went wide, and that enabled Graham to do the switch back, cut back up the inside. So Graham very rapidly closing on their front two, and being into P3. But what we can see at the front is that Sam Pearce has closed up on the back of our race leader, Rob Lewis, and he's really on his back bumper. So good drive from Sam, having not qualified in the top 3. He's kept his nose clean, and there's a little bit of lost traction there from Rob, who runs wide, maybe locked up on the braking a bit. He's enabled Sam to close right back up onto his back bumper, and while this is going on, who's slowly clawing up to the back of them? Yep, it's the beast, it's Graham Crowhurst coming back into this race. So very clean race from these two so far. Rob is normally very consistent, makes very few mistakes. Sam just looks like a little bit better on the brakes through there, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's on the power any quicker, and they come out broadly similar to the kind of distance that they went into that tight technical corner. So pretty similar lap times between these two. It's much harder out front in terms of no slipstream. At the same time as that, you've got no one in front of you, so if you can find your rhythm, this is a tricky circuit to overtake on unless you're prepared to take some significant risks. Sam just a couple of car lengths back, so it doesn't look like he'll be able to stick out the inside coming into this final hairpin right, or tight right. It actually looks a lot slower when you're coming into it from inside the car. Tidy driving from both of them. Very fast right-hander, easy to run wide here. And we do know that the curbs here are treacherous, as we've already seen with Scott, which catapulted him to the right. Tighter line on the way in from Rob, slightly more sweeping line from Sam, but broadly similar exit speeds as they continue to hold the same sort of distance apart. Fast left-hander coming up the car will drift through here if you're not careful. Nicely done by both drivers. An opportunity to close up on the brakes a little bit. Rob just locking up and going a bit wider. Sam a bit tighter on the way in, on the power nice and early. Not really making up much ground. First of the two chicanes, very difficult on the way in here. The curves will throw you up. You want to get on the power. And just a little clip there, as you can see. Rob's just clipped that, and it's allowed Sam to get right up onto his back bumper. So is he going to have a look onto the way into this chicane? Moving backwards and forwards, Rob's taking the defensive line and then coming it off with a very late braking move. Gets it nicely turned in. And very well defended by Rob Lewis. Great driving there from both. Sam not doing anything too risky. So nicely done, and a good example to the rest of the field, which, to be fair, at times has been completely shambolic at certain sections. And last week, with sort of 7 cars involved in various accidents, this is a fine example at the front how to do it. Heavy braking just pushed the pair of them a little bit wider than they might have gone. We come down to the heavy braking zone. It's the last corner of the lap of any note. Sam braking later and taking a bit of time out of Rob there on the power nice and early, but Rob getting good traction and good drive out and maintaining status quo. So time to go round and start another lap. And while all this is going on, who's behind? It's Graham. So Graham can see these two nose to tail up in front. I'm not sure whether or not they're holding each other up or whether or not Graham's got better pace. And if you look at the lap times, he's done a 1:49.3, whereas the two in front have only done 1:50. So he's 7/10 faster on outright lap speed. And that's enabling him to catch up with the guys out in front and bring them back to him. So this is definitely not over just yet. He's wanting to join in and get involved. Rob doing a great job out in front, still no mistakes despite lots of pressure from Sam. The rest of the field are just a little bit further spread out, and Ed's now got onto the back of Paul. So Ed, who's doing a good recovery drive after an early incident, putting Paul under pressure in P5, and we do know that Ed's got more outright pace. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. But right on the back of this group now and closing in every single lap, and Sam has another look at Rob. Rob moves to the inside again, and Sam sends it in sideways. Is that going to give Graham an opportunity to run up the outside? No, he doesn't manage to make it. Getting ever closer and putting Paul under some pressure here. Down the hill now into the braking zone, into the second hairpin, and Paul turns in and he's up on two wheels, and Ed makes a nice neat turn. So Ed's putting that pressure on, and Paul turns into the corner and he's crashed and he's hit into the barrier, and that sent Ed into the back of him, and Ed's got away with it, and Paul sits in P6. So Ed's got through. As he recovers, Scott goes through to take that position, then Alex, and then Sam, the guest driver. So that puts Paul from 5th down to 9th. Having been the person who was putting our leader under pressure, he's now under pressure himself. So unusual circumstances for him to be out in the top 3. Is he thinking, oh, I don't want to make any mistakes here, I do want to get this first podium? Or is he thinking, actually, I want the outright win? And at the same time as that, we just know that the Beast has got no care for anyone or anything, and he will have a go, and he just wants those race wins. He's not playing for safety as he goes up the outside there, and he's hit Sam in the rear quarter and put him into the fence. So that is not good, and that's allowed Russ to come from P4 right the way through to P2. So Sam has dropped down to P3 and Graham's there. Now, no doubt, at the inquiry in the steward's office afterwards, Graham will probably tell us all that he doesn't have any video footage of that from on board, and that it's a really unfortunate set of circumstances. But I'm sure we'll see something on YouTube later, because that's the kind of guy he is. You know, you just need to be really careful about him. We knew that he's a liability. He's taken an opportunity there to have a go at Sam in a really strange place. Maybe the better move there would have been to move to the right and try and take out the inside into turn 1. But there's no video footage available whatsoever for the stewards. So we'll just have to leave it as it is and watch to see whether or not Sam can recover into P2. But that really has allowed Rob, our race leader, to put 4 seconds into the rest of the field. And with the amount of time that's left in this race, I just don't see that particularly being something the field can recover. So for me, it's all about P2 and Russell and Sam, and what's happening there. I mean, Graham's not given up. He's still in the background there. And Sam just dropping off the back of Russ by just around about a second or so, 6/10. So it'll be interesting. I think Sam has been consistently at the front. Russ wasn't really tracking him down, so he has lucked into that position on the back of what happened in the between Graham and Sam. Is he going to manage to hold on to this P2? Sam just clawing things back bit by bit. As we come to the finish, it looks like Rob Lewis is going to cross the line and take that P1. A great drive by him, very solid and consistent. Kiwi Russ is going to take that P2. Sam Pearce is going to cross the line in P3. Ed has managed to get up into P5, a good recovery. P6 for Pro-Am's Scott Thompson, P7 for Alex, P8 for Paul. So obviously a problem there, having run pretty much the whole race in P5 to drop down. Sam, our guest driver, in P9, Tom Starkey P10, Johnny T is going to probably cross the line in P11. Dave of the North crosses the line in P12. Rob the Bear coming round just to finish the lap off, 50 seconds off of the leader originally. So that rounds up our top 30. As we take a look at the table after 3 weekends, and 6 races, it is Rob Lewis who takes the new championship lead, with Matt missing out this week, taking no points. Rob is now in P1 with 94 points, closely followed by Graham in P2 with 92. Matt, despite not actually taking part at the autumn round, still sitting in P3 with 80 points, so not losing too much out, but Rob's still in the lead there. Ed is in P4 with 73. Russ in P5 with 67. Scott in P6 with 57, closely followed by Sam Pearce in P7 with 55, just 2 points behind, and just 5 points behind that, Alex Neville in P8 with 50, Paul in P9 with 15, so quite a big gap down to P9, and Dave in P10 with 14, so very close between the positions of 9 to 14. But as it stands at the moment, a little bit of a midfield battle between Scott, Sam and Alex, but out front after 6 races and 3 rounds before we head into the next round at the Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, home circuit for many of our drivers, is Rob Lewis leading the championship with 94 points. Nick's gone a little bit wide there, which enabled Tom Starkey to get a run. Baby has got a run up the outside, hits it into Tom, and all 3 of them have gone off.